March 1991. That month, more than 148 million citizens of the Soviet Union went to the polls in a nationwide referendum. The outcome was decisive. 76% of the population voted yes to preserving the USSR as a renewed federation of sovereign and equal republics. The people wanted the Union, yet behind the closed doors of power, the fate of 290 million people was being negotiated without regard for that popular mandate. Welcome to an in-depth analysis of the days that changed the world. Today, we will not discuss an inevitable collapse. Instead, we will examine the efforts of those who, with both successes and mistakes, tried to prevent the disintegration of the socialist motherland. By August 1991, the situation had become critical. The economy was suffering from the consequences of contradictory reforms, while nationalist tensions continued to intensify. The final trigger was the new Union Treaty, scheduled to be signed on August 20th. For many senior government officials, this document did not represent renewal. It was the Soviet Union's death certificate, transforming it into a weak confederation without an effective central authority. Faced with what they saw as the imminent loss of national sovereignty and territorial integrity, a group of senior officials decided to act. These were not outsiders. They were the very backbone of the Soviet state. Vice President Gennady Yanayev, KGB Chairman Vladimir Khrushchev, and Defense Minister Dmitry Yazov. In the early hours of August 19th, the country awoke to unexpected news. The formation of the State Committee on the State of Emergency had been announced. Its statement was straightforward. The nation had become ungovernable, and emergency measures were necessary to restore order, stabilize the economy, and preserve social unity. While television stations broadcast Swan Lake, a familiar signal that the Soviet state was entering a period of extraordinary political change, tanks rolled into Moscow. But contrary to the version often repeated, no shots were fired. The troops had been given strict orders not to open fire on their fellow citizens. The objective was stability, not civil war. While the committee's decrees sought to stabilize the country, its leadership soon fell into a state of fatal paralysis. In Crimea, Mikhail Gorbachev remained at his presidential residence. Although the committee sent a delegation demanding that he either declare a state of emergency or resign, his refusal and the isolation that followed created a dangerous power vacuum. The absence of a clear chain of command proved to be the operation's greatest strategic mistake. The objective was not to launch a violent coup, but to carry out what its organizers considered a constitutional transition to preserve the Union. That strategy, however, never fully materialized, allowing figures such as Boris Yeltsin, a reformist determined to secure the independence of the Russian Soviet Federative Socialist Republic, to capitalize on the confusion from the building of the Supreme Soviet in Moscow, setting in motion the final stage of the Soviet Union's disintegration. Taking advantage of the Emergency Committee's indecision, Boris Yeltsin presented himself as the defender of democracy, a concept that in practice increasingly meant the dismantling of Soviet central authority. The conflict between the leadership of the Russian SFSR and the Soviet central government was not merely ideological, it had become a struggle for political supremacy. Officials who had once sworn to uphold the Constitution of the Soviet Union watched as the state gradually fragmented from within. The committee's unwillingness to enforce the emergency measures decisively allowed the governments of the individual republics to ignore directives issued from Moscow, once again disregarding the mandate expressed by millions of Soviet citizens in the March referendum. The final blow did not come through a popular revolution. It came with 3 signatures in a forest. In December 1991, at the Belavezhskaya Pushcha Nature Reserve, the leaders of Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus met in secret. Ignoring both Soviet constitutional procedures and the referendum endorsed by millions of citizens, they signed the agreement declaring that the Soviet Union had ceased to exist. For many observers, it was a decision made by political elites who preferred sovereign control over their own republics rather than preserving the unity of a global superpower. On December 25, 1991, Mikhail Gorbachev resigned as president of a country that had already been dismantled by its own political leadership. That evening, the red flag was lowered from the Kremlin for the last time, marking the beginning of a new era, one defined by uncertainty, economic hardship, and the loss of stability for millions of people across the former Soviet Union. History has not been kind to Mikhail Gorbachev. For many people across the former Soviet republics, and for those who remember the stability of the Union with nostalgia, his name does not symbolize reform, but collapse, and for some, even betrayal. He is remembered by many as the leader who, whether through political miscalculation, weakness, or misplaced optimism, allowed the socialist project to be dismantled without mounting effective resistance to both external pressures and the ambitions of emerging political elites. While his legacy has often been praised in the West, many who lost their homeland, their livelihoods, and their sense of identity during the turbulent years that followed continue to view his leadership with deep disappointment. The Soviet Union disappeared from the map, but one question continues to spark debate among viewers of this channel. What would the world look like today if the will of the people had been respected, and if the Soviet Union still existed? What do you think was the exact moment when the Soviet Union could still have been saved? Or do you believe its collapse had already become inevitable, making the preservation of the USSR impossible? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, share this video, and turn on notifications so you never miss our future content. Your support helps this channel grow and motivates us to continue producing in-depth documentaries on Soviet history and the events that shaped the modern world. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.